This is the new Insta360 X4, the latest version of what I think is the best 360 camera on the market. And I've been using the previous version, the X3, since it came out in September of 2022, and before that, the X2. And the X3 provided quite a jump in quality, particularly in low light conditions, but was otherwise more or less an incremental improvement. But now with the increase from 5.7K to 8K resolution on the X4, you might be wondering whether it's worth the upgrade. Now, this is not a sponsored video. I decided not to participate in the official launch of the X4, which happened a few weeks ago, mainly because I wanted to be able to test it out on my recent trip to Ecuador and to provide a more honest comparison of the X4 to the X3. And you would have seen YouTube having been flooded with all those paid launch videos all at the same time, and those need to be approved by Insta360, so they're far from unbiased. Now, having said that, Insta360 did provide me with the camera, which I get to keep, so do keep that in mind when watching the video. And I will provide an affiliate link below where you can learn more and shop for the camera if you're interested, which won't cost you anything extra, but it does help out the channel. Now, I'm also not going to do a full review of every single feature of the camera because there are plenty of those videos online now as well. Instead, I'm going to focus on the features and specifications that matter most to my specific use case, which is using the camera in extremely difficult conditions while on the trails and in the mountains, while running and hiking. And I'll mostly be comparing the X4 to the X3 as I try to honestly answer the question of whether I think it's worth the upgrade after putting it to the test over the past couple of weeks. So let's start with the main specifications. The X4 can shoot up to 8K at 30 frames per second or 5.7K 60 frames per second, which is a nice upgrade from the X3, which had a maximum resolution of 5.7K 30 frames per second. If you had seen my reviews of either the X2 or the X3, you'll remember that the resolution was my primary complaint. And that's because while 5.7K sounds really good if you say it quickly, and it is better than GoPro's maximum resolution of 5.3K, you have to keep in mind that a 360 camera is filming all around you, above and below at all times. So it's spreading this resolution out over a much larger field of view. But when you then render the video file in post-production, you'll only be using a fraction of this resolution, maybe something closer to 1080p. So by filming now in 8K resolution, the resulting video clips are closer to 4K, depending on how wide a field of view that you render. And for social media use, like on Instagram, that's not going to make a big difference. But for someone like me who produces content for YouTube in 4K UHD, this upgrade is a really big deal. The X4 is also capable of recording at a higher bitrate of 200 megabits instead of 120 on the X3, which is needed in order to handle the additional information contained in an 8K image. The battery's runtime has also been increased by a reported 67%, now lasting up to 135 minutes in ideal conditions. And this wasn't something that I ever personally had an issue with because I tend to use these cameras, these 360 cameras, quite sparingly, along with other action cameras like a GoPro. But this could be a big deal for anyone wanting to shoot primarily on a 360 camera. It's also got a new AI chip to help with the camera's higher resolution and frame rates. And it has a few other new features that we saw on the Insta360 Ace Pro, like gesture control. Now, right away, I noticed that the image is just better overall. And the first thing that you should notice in this side-by-side comparison is how much better it performs in tricky, high-contrast environments like under tree cover. And this is arguably the worst place to test a camera like this. In fact, when doing a sponsored video, it's something that camera manufacturers typically ask you to avoid. But the X4 performs surprisingly well, especially in the shadows. The other thing I noticed right away with the X4 is how much the color science has improved. Check out the trees in the top left. The X3 I always found had a bit of a magenta tint to it, which I always had to try to compensate for in post-production. And you can see that there in the trees compared to the much more natural brown tones on the X4. The X3 also didn't handle highlights very well. You can see lots of what's called fringing around the leaves of the trees against the sky, where there's a hard purple edge. But the X4 handles it much better. And again, you can really see how much the contrast ratio has improved on the X4. There's just way more detail in the shadows. It almost looks like an HDR image. Just look at that tree stump there, and the difference is night and day. And there's just way less artifacting in the highly detailed parts of the shot, particularly in the gravel in this shot here. It's just a much cleaner image overall, and I suspect that's from a combination of the higher resolution, the higher bit rate, and the more advanced chip. Now these improvements do come at a cost. First of all, the X4 does literally cost more. It now retails for $500 US instead of $400 for the X3. The camera is also larger both in length and thickness, and that's partly to accommodate the larger battery. And that larger battery and screen also means the X4 is a little bit heavier, and the X3 was already getting a little heavy in my opinion. And I feel like some of these upgrades might be good for the average person, obviously who this camera is probably targeted at, but at some point it's gonna be a little bit too big and heavy for a runner like myself to justify carrying it for say 100 miles during a race. By the time you add the lens cap and a selfie stick, we're talking 360 grams. And for me, this would be on top of carrying my GoPro and my phone, so now I'm carrying close to 1 kilogram of action camera gear. The other problem with the added thickness is that it's going to increase the chances of parallaxing in the image, since the lenses are now just that much further apart. And this is a problem that I've read about with the GoPro 360 camera, which is even wider. Now this is only really an issue though when objects get really close to the lens, but it's something to consider. Now I personally would love to see a version that's optimized for size and weight, maybe with a much smaller display like the one that had been on the X2, because I don't really need to see a high resolution preview of the image, and I personally never change my settings anyway, and it's something that I can do on the app on my phone in case I do need to change the settings or to double check a shot. And the same thing with the battery. The new larger battery and the increased runtime that comes with it, I'm sure will be considered a huge improvement for many, but for me, I'd rather have the option to use that smaller and lighter weight battery, the one that had worked with the X2 and the X3, and then to maybe just have a spare one in my drop bag during a race just in case, especially given that I've now invested in a few extra batteries and a fast charger. As I said, I've never really had a problem with my battery running out on a 360 camera because I tend to use it so sparingly, just as an extra kind of wide camera angle in addition to other action cameras. But again, I recognize that my use case might be pretty specific. So the question is, should you upgrade if you've already got one of the older models? And what if you're just about to buy your first 360 camera? Is the X4 the right one for you, or should you look at trying to get a deal now on the X3 instead? Well, if you are only planning on using a 360 camera for posting on Instagram, and maybe you're only using the Insta360 mobile app instead of the desktop app, where you can take advantage of that increase in resolution, then the X3 might still be a great option for you, because you're no doubt going to be able to find those being unloaded on Facebook Marketplace. And even buying it new, you could still save $100 by going with the X3. But if you're concerned with quality like I am, then it's a no-brainer. Despite the increase in size and weight of the X4, I will be officially retiring my X3 and using the X4 exclusively from now on. And if you're still using the X2 or possibly the original Insta360 One X and had maybe held off on upgrading to the X3, then you would no doubt notice a huge difference in quality, a huge improvement by moving right up to the X4 now. The X3 offered a big improvement in low light performance, and the X4 takes it another step further and finally fulfills my one request that I had for that 8K resolution. Now let me know in the comments below what you think about these improvements and if you noticed a difference in the quality of the footage yourself, and if you're planning on upgrading as well.